like boom, things really opened up. It was really that experience that then, 20 some years ago has really carried me forward with this interest in mindfulness, this interest in sharing mindfulness with kids, with caregivers, working in a lot of different contexts since that time. So I thought I would just start with, we've been doing some different practices during my time here, but I start with a practice I came up with a few years ago. It's called the mindful seat. And to me, getting into the moment, our senses are one of the best ways we can get into the moment. And so we'll just take, 3 or 4 minutes to settle in this evening, checking in with our senses and sensations, emotions, actions, by kind of which I mean like impulses and urges, and then lastly, thoughts. So we can find a comfortable position, even though it's late on Friday afternoon and at the end of the school year too, which is tough. We can find that nice, comfortable posture. As always, it's your comfort level, but you can close or lower your eyes. You can enjoy the sound of the bell as it fades. And then taking some moments to tune into other sounds that you're aware of in the room or wherever you are back on Zoom. Near sounds and distant sounds. And perhaps also even the sound of your own breath. Noticing how the sound of your breath is different outside your body than inside your body when the air goes in. As you breathe too with your nose, maybe noticing any smells you're aware of, lingering food, soap, shampoo. Maybe lingering tastes in your mouth from the nice spread that folks brought us this evening. And whether your eyes are open or closed, just noticing what you see, shapes, shadows against your eyelids, or shapes and colors in the room. Sensations. Your back and legs against the chair, the temperature of the air against your skin, texture of your clothing. And stepping away from our senses now toward E for emotions. What emotions are here? Curiosity, boredom, excitement, frustration, sadness, sleepiness. Just watching, welcoming any emotions as they arrive and depart, like guests from beyond, as Rumi's poem said. Noticing different emotions and even a few emotions at the same time. And then shifting your awareness toward A for actions, urges or impulses. You want to stretch, yawn. Do you want to run out of here screaming? Just noticing what urges are here. And then lastly, thoughts. Judgments even, just welcoming them. Nothing's right or wrong. This is great. This is terrible. How will the traffic be on the way home? Just noticing thoughts as they arise. And we'll just enjoy 3 more breaths together and I'll ring the bell. You can raise your eyes. And I'll just invite you to reflect. Notice if there's a bit of a shift in how you're feeling. Maybe yes, maybe no. Bit of a shift in how the room feels. Maybe yes, maybe no. And wouldn't it be nice to feel like this a bit more often, right? Some of us are familiar with mindfulness, and it gets easy to find this place, this way of being. For others, it takes a little practice. We actually build a muscle, a new pathway in the brain that makes it easier to get to. But especially when we're busy parents, when we're busy caregivers, right? Moments like this are hard to come by. And so this will actually be probably the longest practice that I'll offer, because I know that I'm a parent. It is very busy. It is very hard to find a moment, let alone 20 minutes to sit and practice, let alone time to go on a retreat or something like that. That is not a big part of my life these days, even though it was for a long time. So I do want to share some just shorter practices for ourselves and for our families too. And maybe start also by sharing, I guess, Zoom offered a lovely introduction. I think I forgot to add to my bio, I'm also a father. So I've been a special education teacher in my life, clinical psychologist, some other things. And my 9-year-old son is out in the other room. He's heard me, he could probably do my routine, actually. He's heard me do my talk so many times. So he's taking a break out there. I've got a 6-year-old daughter at home as well. So I have this experience now as a parent. In fact, I wrote a book about child development many years ago called Child's Mind. And it's sort of one of those things where I wrote it before I had kids. And it's like that joke that's like, I was the best parent in the world until I became one, right? So if you have that book, maybe, get one of my newer books. But there's that. So, but I have tested a lot of this stuff and discovered like what kind of works and what kind of doesn't. But I want to start by going back a bit in time to when I was a kid, where I never heard the word mindfulness. Right. It's like so trendy right now. It's great. I get to talk about this thing that I love. It's my job. I get to fly to amazing, beautiful places like Vancouver, where I get to talk about mindfulness. And when I was a kid, this was not such a word growing up in the 80s, but I had these experiences that to me were something like mindfulness, right? Being with my dad and like watching clouds in the sky. And I remember him saying, if you pick a cloud and you breathe, you can actually make the cloud disappear with your mind. And, I realize now it's like, oh, the cloud's going to disappear either way. But it felt like this amazing kind of magic trick, like 3 or 4 minutes of breathing and the cloud evaporates and drifts away. Right? Or walking at this camp, I remember walking silently in the woods. The counselor said, walk as silently as you can. And if you've ever done mindful walking, right, it's really just that. It's like, try to walk. I'm just noticing each footstep on the ground, the movement of each muscle, the texture of the forest floor. Right? It's a lot like the mindful walking instructions. Or noticing all the sounds in the forest, the counselor said. We're going to notice all these sounds. We're thinking, we're not going to hear anything, right? We're in the woods. There's nothing out here. And then sure enough, right, hear the wind whispering in the trees, hear the birds. And that was like a mindful listening exercise, which is now actually probably my favorite way of practicing mindfulness. I find focusing on my breath a little bit boring. I have to confess, the breathing is boring. And so I'll often just start a practice just by waking up in the morning, if my kids don't jump on me first, but I'll lay in bed, wake up and just like, I'm going to just notice 10 sounds before I get out of bed, or try to just enjoy 10 good breaths before I get out of bed and start my day. And other days, something else wakes me up. It's a bit more urgent. But that's been a really, that continues to then kind of inform how I practice and how I think about also sharing mindfulness with kids or making it playful and fun in different ways. Because those of us that have a mindfulness practice, like we know it can be kind of boring sometimes, right? So finding how do we bring this into our families? How do we practice this for ourselves? How do we think about sharing this for our kids is really important. So that was some of my kid experience. Many years later, I actually had this really challenging time when I was in university, took some time off, and my parents actually dragged me on a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, who's an incredible Vietnamese monk who did a lot of work bringing mindfulness to this part of the world, translating mindfulness culturally and linguistically. It was a really life-changing experience for me. And that was, 25 years ago or something at this point. And I was, as I said, a teacher and a few other things. So what I want to talk a bit about this evening, in addition to doing practices, is, if I can get the slides going, a few different things, like what is mindfulness? Who here has some experience with mindfulness already? Because we can maybe skip over that a little bit, so we can kind of move through that. Why teach our kids? Why share this ourselves? A bit on science, and I want to just offer some practices. So where I want to begin is, I think we've probably all heard, maybe it's a cliche, the like put on your own oxygen mask first thing. Right. So we know that. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember someone writing to Lori Gottlieb, who's a psychologist, like, how are we going to care for our kids? And she said, imagine you're flying on an airplane, right? And then suddenly, the plane starts to shake and everyone gets a little bit anxious, right? What's going on, right? Did the engine fall off? What's happening here? And when the pilot gets on, right, he or she says something like, maybe, folks who are experiencing some turbulence, we're going to change course. We're going to ask you to stay in your seats. We're going to get you to destination safely. Please don't move around the cabin too much. And what happens when the pilot does that is they set the tone for what we call emotional contagion, which is about as what you could imagine, or co-regulation. And then not everybody, but most of us calm down and go back to our crossword puzzles or, whatever it is that we're doing. Right? So when the pilot is calm, the passengers, there's the conditions under which the passengers will calm down. If the pilot is panicking, everyone's going to panic, right? It's like was the movie about Miracle on the Hudson, like Sully Sullenberger, like, folks, double bird strike, we're just going to land on the Hudson, right? Okay, we're going to land on the Hudson, cool, right? They'll make a movie about this, right? If it's the pilot's like, oh, it's turbulence, right? Everyone's going to be like, oh my God, it's turbulence. What does that mean, right? We, right, are that pilot. We have got to set the tone. And that becomes really powerful. I get asked all the time, like, what's the best mindfulness practice for a kid who's having a panic attack or has attention deficit or is struggling in this way or that way? And I used to really struggle with this question because people would ask this all the time. And then I realized, and I don't think this is a cop-out answer, but I realized the best practice for a child who's struggling with illness, with mental health, with behavior, with learning, with anything, the best practice for that kid is actually going to be our practice. It's like, oh, okay. Right? A lot of parents are like, no, I want what's the breathing thing for this? And, there's that to an extent, but the more we do actually take care of ourselves, the more we are that foundation, that secure attachment, right? Attachment theory really back in style these days, right? And so it really is that our practice truly is the most important thing for kids. In fact, if you get nothing else out of tonight, I'll share some family practices, but if you just go home and you're a bit more calm and well-regulated, that's the best possible thing for your kids, right? More than teaching them a hot chocolate breath or another little visualization or something like that. So when people ask, how do we create more mindful kids? I often think, well, the opposite, I know how to do that, right? You want stressed out, miserable kids, surround them with stressed out, miserable adults. You want more mindful, compassionate kids, right? We need to surround them with more mindful and compassionate adults, right? It's our presence, right? It's not just our physical presence. Our physical presence can be like this, right? Where we're half paying attention. Our physical presence can really be a full presence where we're helping the kids manage their emotions. We're that safe and secure object for them to connect to, even after they've been through maybe some challenging, whether it's traumatic experiences or whether it's just a really tough day at school, right? We're there to reconnect with, we're as present as possible. So it becomes so important for ourselves to do that self-care stuff, to learn how to be present and learn how to be present for ourselves, as well as learning how to be present for our kids, learning how to be present if we have a co-caregiver, a co-parent, right? Or other extended family members or other kind of kinship networks, right? That we're co-regulating together. right? Because that ends up being the most important thing for the kiddos. So, I often think too, Thich Nhat Hanh, one of my favorite mindfulness teachers, talks about planting seeds. And if we want seeds to grow, they need sunlight and they need rainwater and they need soil and things like that. And that, to me, this is supposed to be a trellis with seeds growing, if you're wondering what the metaphor is here. Right. But the idea is like, well, the community is the soil, the parents are the rainwater, the teachers or the educators or the caregivers, the professionals maybe are the sunlight. And then that plant can grow, right? That mindfulness practice can grow. And yet at the same time, I'm also a believer in like, in a sense, you can't teach kids mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is actually this innate quality that we were given, that really is a part of us. And so to me, teaching kids mindfulness and teaching adults mindfulness is in some ways unlearning society's lessons about you belong or you don't belong, unlearning you need to be doing this and you need to be doing that to be a successful person or a good person. You need to be busy all the time, in a sense, right? We need to unlearn all that stuff. So kids actually can be this wonderful lesson. I was thinking about I don't know how old my nephew is now, maybe 13. And when he was really little, I took him to this pond near our house. And we were walking back up from the pond to the parking lot. And I was sort of like, come on, come on, come on. And he's like 2 wandering around. And I was like, we got to hurry up. I got to get home, do my mindfulness practice, right? But I was like, oh, what if this is my practice. Like, here's my little nephew, Sam, wandering off and like looking under the rock and smelling the bark. And it's like, why don't I just take 20 minutes and follow this kid around and look at the world through his eyes? And maybe that's my practice for today. I don't have to drive home as fast as I can to get on my cushion, right? So again, like kids, that sort of beginner's mind, that child's mind, how do we keep that? How do we maintain that? How do we keep that as adults? And as we've been caregivers or parents or whatever our role is, right, we have that amazing opportunity looking at the world through these kids' eyes again. It is such a gift, and we want to make sure we give ourselves that gift too at the same time. I'm going to share a few slides I also shared this morning. Apologies for those of you who were here that you saw me share this, right? It says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? Maybe you've tried this as a caregiver, right? I've tried it, special ed teacher, tried as a therapist, tried as a parent, right? Kids, mindfulness is not just calming down, but kids calm down. We all calm down when we feel safe, right? When we feel safe and secure, safe attachment, safe environment, predictable environment, right? All of those are key. They're critical, right? So again, what is it that we're doing to self-regulate our voice, our tone, all these kinds of things? Because, I will get into practices, and I've been kind of doing some setup here for a while, right? But what we see is that parents who practice mindfulness, there's better communication, more happiness, fewer accidents in the home, right? Educators, we see kind of all kinds of wonderful things happening. Therapists, that's my day job, right? Clients heal faster with therapists who practice mindfulness. Medical professionals, greater patient trust so that they're more likely to follow doctors' orders, that kind of thing. So we see these amazing benefits. Mindfulness is contagious, right? We know anxiety is contagious. Anxiety is one of the most contagious emotions, right? We know stress is contagious, but the good news is that calm is contagious. We actually, we hear about this and, stories from Thich Nhat Hanh and great teachers. We actually see this now when we actually do research on one person practicing mindfulness actually does ripple out person to person to person. So to me, I think, mindfulness to me, it's about paying attention to the here and now with kindness and curiosity. And when we teach kids anything or we teach ourselves anything, like that's a tall order right there, right? With kids, we want to break it into smaller pieces, right? Like we don't teach kids, calculus in kindergarten, we teach them 1 + 1, right? So maybe we want to think then, okay, how do we think about teaching ourselves and kids to pay attention? How do we think about getting into the here and now, getting into the present moment where we're not, what's going to happen this weekend, or we're not, what happened last weekend, or what's going to happen in the distant future with the election or the climate, or what happened when I was a kid, but we can be in the moment. Right? Someone asked me recently, how do I define mindful parenting? And I kind of struggled with this, and what I kind of stumbled into was, parenting from the present moment in a way that we all have our own childhood baggage, right? But we're not reacting to our childhood and doing the opposite of what our parents or caregivers did. And we're also not, like Freud would say, repetition compulsion, just, automatically autopilot doing exactly what our parents did. We're in the present. We're seeing the child or the teenager or the young adult, right? We never finished parenting, right? In front of us. How do I respond in this moment to this challenge? With maybe some of what I learned from my parents and maybe some of what I don't want to take from my caregivers, but what in this moment is going to be what matters. So that's what I think of when I think of parenting from the present. Not reacting from, not repeating the mistakes of our own caregivers, getting out of that autopilot that we talk about and finding our own innate wisdom to figure out how I can respond, not react to the situation. To be calm and present so that, as a friend of mine, Hal says, right, I can be that calming presence to everyone in my life, not just those I'm caring for. Right? We want to bring, my friend Amy Saltzman says, kindness and curiosity to our present experience. So we can break that down further, right? Paying attention, being in the present moment, right? Using our senses perhaps to get into the present. We can think about how do we try to be less judgmental ourselves, right? So many of our kids, they've got, actually so many of us here, right, have that inner critic. I'm the worst parent on the playground, right? My kid didn't get that grade, right? What is the matter with me as a caregiver, right? We blame ourselves, right? I think, different genders have this very, very different too. A lot more judgment, I think, and kind of mom shaming in our society, right? You're not a good enough mom because of this. You should be doing this. You should be working full time, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing that. And I think, dads and other folks have different pressures too, right? Different cultures put different pressures on us, right? And then on top of that, right, those of us that maybe come from a more marginalized experience, I think about attachment a lot. I think about our, attachment to caregivers, but what's our attachment to society, right? A lot of people have a disrupted attachment to society that said, you don't belong here. You're not supposed to be here. And that message that people carry. So learning how to quiet that critical voice that we've internalized with the in-laws, critical voice that we've internalized, that's a big part of this work too, to let go of some of that stuff. I'd like to do an exercise on that toward the end as we go to. So moving ahead a little bit, right? Don't believe everything you think. And of course, some people have seen this illustration before. It's sort of a classic in the mindfulness world. But I love it because, what do you notice that's different about these two, right? Human being, right? They've got the, public speaking, I guess, right? They're worried about bills are piling up, traffic. I got to experience Vancouver traffic today, my son and I was like, we may not make it to tonight's event because we're coming back from, was it Capilano Bridge? I could not believe that. I was like, this is 4 miles. It's like 48 minutes. Anyway, I will not go on about that. But I was really breathing hard in the car, right? My son can attest to that, right? All that stuff on our minds, right? Our kids' futures, their past, right? The world's future, right? Meanwhile, the dog just sees the sunshine in the trees, right? And the reality is we're humans, we're not dogs, right? We can't, we have to think about pickups and past and future and all of that, but we get stuck like that. Right? Friday afternoon, and instead of being like, walking the dog in Stanley Park or whatever, right? We're like, oh my gosh, it's 63 hours till I'm back in the office, right? Or I gotta get, when's pickup gonna be this weekend? There's the sleepover, there's the, piano practice, there's this. How do we get into the moment, right? So to me, it's about learning how to be in the moment when it's helpful to be in the moment and switch back out when it's useful to switch back out, to go into planning, doing mode from that being mode. Right? Trying to embody that human being as opposed to human doing, another one of the kind of mindfulness slogans that we hear. What else I like about this picture is that I had a kid a teenager once say to me, "Oh, Dr. Willard, mindfulness, I like it's not like all like rainbows and unicorns, because the human being is, thinking about all that stuff, walking the dog, they're about to step in the dog shit." And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. Like, mindfulness is not pretending everything is great. It's noticing the beauty, and it's also noticing the danger. But when we're stressed, when we've got our own baggage, right, our lenses are not clear. Our perception is not clear. When we're stressed, right, we actually perceive threats where they don't exist, right? We start to think everyone is out to get us, right? My kids are just trying to ruin, my evening, or, this person's out to get me, right? That's actually just part of the natural stress response wired into us. So learning then how to override that stress response so that we don't have that, we call it the amygdala hijacking. The amygdala is sort of the emotional, big kind of fight or flight part of the brain. When that's active, our thinking brain shuts down. We can't make good decisions. Our kids can't make good decisions. None of us can. Our empathy shuts down, our ability to see other people's perspective, right? They're just trying to ruin my day, right? Not, oh, maybe this is what's going on. Right? One of my favorite studies I learned about kind of kids who, it was a school where there's a lot of disciplinary problems. And they brought in some consultants, and the consultant said, all right, we're going to try to fix your discipline problem. What we want you to do before you send kids to the principal's office, which is what we do in America, is you have to think of 3 reasons why the kid might have acted this way. And it can't just be because this kid's trying to ruin my day or this kid's a jerk. And what happened was the number of referrals to discipline went way, way, way down. And I'm a kind of cynical guy, and I was a teacher, so I was like, who wants to do all that paperwork, right? Really. But the reality is they somehow accounted for that variable. But what they found was that when they invited people to just really get curious, why are they acting that way? Right? Then the number of discipline referrals went down because solutions started to come up, right? Maybe that kid is hungry. Maybe that kid is tired. Maybe that kid is getting bullied. Right? We can do that with kids that we care for. We can do that with our own kids, right? I mean, my wife still tells me when she's like, I think you need to eat something, Chris. I'm like, me? What? No, like, no, come on, I'm fine. Right? But we all, we have that, right? And our kids do too. So that self-care piece, that caring for the other caregivers, that caring for those that we're charged with, right, is so important. And when we take a step back and think, why might this be happening? Right? What's underneath this behavior? Empathy starts to appear and solutions start to appear a little bit more organically. So let's see, let me move ahead a little bit here as I think a bit more about, I've been talking a lot more about things in terms of the biopsychosocial kind of model of how we approach thriving. And this morning, actually, when I was giving a talk, someone said, what about the spiritual? And I actually really do want to add in the spiritual. I always get nervous about whether I'm allowed to talk about the spiritual with whatever the audience is, right? But taking good physical care of ourselves, mindfully caring for our bodies, mindfully caring for our minds, and lastly, mindfully caring for our relationships, right? With compassion and self-compassion. And so thinking this through a little bit, breathing being one of the biggest things that we can do. And I'll just say a little bit about breathing. But I learned recently from a book by James Nestor called Breath, that we actually, if we slow our breath down to 5 or 6 breaths in a minute, what actually happens is that we breathe deeply, the oxygen hits nerve endings on the bottom of our lungs, and it tells our nervous system to settle down. It tells us that we're safe. This is why breathing is important. Right? This is why co-regulating our breathing with others matters. When we regulate our breath, we regulate our body, our nervous system, our brain, and then our attention, our impulses, and our emotions. So if we're able to step back, I need to take a few breaths, right? From a conflict with the other caregivers, right? Conflict with our own child, right? It starts to settle ourselves down, right? Take a few breaths or something like that, right? And when we model that, it's even more key, right? Finding these ways that we model it, which my son's in the room, so I'm not going to share all my secrets of how I sneak all the vegetables in. But we know that, I talk also about breathing is like, you breathe deeply and slowly, we have this reset button in the bottom of our lungs that kind of resets us. So finding ways to make breathing fun, because my son did tell me once that breathing was boring and he was never going to breathe again. But the good news is he is alive and breathing in the room, as you can see. But making it fun, my friend Daniel and I, we did some, made an alphabet book of like A is for the alligator breath, right? B is the butterfly breath, breathing in. My daughter Maisie calls this the rainbow unicorn princess mermaid butterfly breath. Right? We can just breathe in and breathe out. And all of this slows our breath down to that kind of 5 or 6 breaths in a minute rate. With teenagers, right, they get a little bit, eye rolly sometimes. We have to make it really practical. Just going like this, it becomes hard to not breathe deeply and slowly. This actually stretches out what's called the vagus nerve. I learned this from a mindfulness teacher named Fleet Mall, who's actually in prison for many years. But it's a self-regulation practice we do without realizing it oftentimes. Right? So teenagers who, they don't want to know that they're doing mindfulness, right? Maybe that's one for them. The hot chocolate breath, a favorite, breathing in like you're smelling, out cooling off, in smelling, out cooling off. And finding then those moments that actually make the most sense, right? To plug these in, right? Closing the car door, a few breaths, right? Kids go to bed, a few breaths. I was on some like summit a few years ago and someone was saying, when do you get your time to practice? I was like, when my kids are watching 22 minutes of Daniel Tiger, I get 22 minutes to focus on my breath or do a little meditation practice, right? We don't have much time, but we can look for it. We can bring it in these different ways, and we can share it. Oops, I'm a little bit behind here, with our families as well. Another one I like, a sigh is a way we let out frustration. Right? Teenagers will sometimes sigh at us as we've had the experience, right? Like, ugh. My friend Irene McHenry, she talks about just take a breath in, let out a nice long silent sigh all the way down to the bottom of your breath. And then just letting your breath reset itself. Right? So that these are a few ways to start to bring this in. Other things I do, like with my family, like if we're playing backgammon or something, right? I'll be like, okay, it's getting really tense, and you just lean back, take a few breaths, right? And then like lean back into the game and sort of seeing, watching my kids start to do that. Or like at a traffic light, when there is traffic, right? There's this horrible traffic light on the way to the kids' school. I'll be like, there's a traffic light. I'm super stressed. I'm going to see how many breaths it is till the light changes. And now my daughter is sometimes like, Dad, there's traffic. Can we do some breathing? Yes, right? Fold her into it, right? These little ways that we can start to integrate it into family life, right? I was thinking a lot during the pandemic, actually wanting to go out and spend a lot more time in nature. We know that walking in nature, forest bathing, actually walking, light walking 20 minutes a day, as good, according to some research, as medication for mild to moderate depression or anxiety or ADHD, right? Finding that time, and actually with kids, especially as they get to be teenagers, and to make a kind of generalization, guys and male identified folks, right? There is that sort of like sitting across and making eye contact can feel very threatening. And I think that there are reasons that the cliche is sort of fathers and sons fixing things together, fishing together, doing these side-by-side activities that are a little bit more mediated, right, than just staring at each other. So mindful walking, oh, did you hear that bird? At the beginning of the pandemic, I remember actually noticing how it was spring, so it was like a different bird every week. And we start to count how many bird sounds can we hear in our yard, right? Some of it's, boredom is the necessity of the mother of invention or whatever, of mindfulness practices. But these were some ways, Or we just take walks around the neighborhood, noticing the different colors that we saw. What flowers are out this week? How does this street smell different this week than last week? Oh, there's a new roses are in blossom this week. Right? My daughter actually, she still loves smelling the flowers. I feel like such a mindful dad when she is like, can we smell the flowers? The other day, she actually found some flowers on the ground. She's like, I had to smell the flowers. And she picked up, they're like plastic fake flowers. I was like, so now we have this joke, like, Dad, I'm gonna smell the fake flowers. I'm like, okay. But these are ways, again, to kind of do some integrating. Other ways of doing mindful walking, right? Noticing on your walk, what's beautiful on this walk. Noticing the same tree or something every day. How does it look different each day? Maybe even making a little photo essay about that. Right? Walking with all of our senses, walking silently, like I talked about. Right? When I was a kid, I get a lot of bubble wrap from Amazon orders, unfortunately. That's actually a great thing with kids, a little game to try to walk on bubble wrap and not break the bubbles on the bubble wrap. Try to walk a little more mindfully. So these are a few things. We also, as a family, in terms of the mindful psychological side of things, we do what we call roses and thorns every night, a little gratitude practice. And we know that actually we're wired with what's called a negativity bias as humans. We generally perceive more danger than positive things. We take in 4 times as much negative as positive. And so we need that for survival, but the world's actually pretty safe now. So taking time for gratitude as a family, we'll do like 3 or 4 positive things about the day every night. Right? It was a sunny day. I got to ride my bike, had a soccer game, right? 3 roses, 1 thorn, I fell off my bike, right? Thorn, 1 bud, something I'm looking forward to tomorrow. It's become this really nice nightly ritual. Right? My daughter's 6 and she never wants to go to bed. So she's like, let's do 100 roses. I'm like, let's do like 3 roses, right? But it's still this nice gratitude practice. Now, I know that there will be a day that my kids become teenagers before I want them to. Their eyes will roll so far back in their heads, they'll sprain their eyeballs or something. But the idea, though, is still like they will have made this a habit over time, right? That before bed, you kind of like lay down and you think about what went well in your day. That, even, and the other thing actually about teenagers is, I learned this actually about public speaking. When you ask a question, it's very hard to not answer that question in your own mind. So saying, oh, what's the best part of your day? And they run upstairs. What have we got? Oh, time. Okay, 2 more minutes. Right, they're actually still asking themselves that question. Right, so it's important. I just want to say a couple more adaptations. I'm so sorry. Right, that we can think about. Other things that I like to do, right? Using the 5 senses, thinking about play and games. One of my favorite studies was Lev Vygotsky did this experiment trying to get 8-year-olds to stand still. So he got them together and said, stand still. Of course, they run around all over the place. He called them back in and said, stand still, but this time imagine that you're like a knight guarding a castle. Right? This time they stand still for like 15 minutes. So tapping into play, using music, right? Listen to just one instrument throughout the song, or notice how you feel in a sad song, a happy song, an anxious song. These are ways of learning more kind of emotional intelligence and awareness. Bringing mindfulness into sports. This is a big one. My son loves soccer. Leo Messi practices mindfulness. He got so bored, I guess, during the pandemic that he started practicing mindfulness. I have Jenga blocks. Pull them out. It says, do 3 hot chocolate breaths, or name 3 sounds you can hear. Candyland, I'm convinced, is a game designed to torture adults with boredom, but you can, sort of add these different elements in to make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more mindful, right? Draw a purple card, name a sound, orange card, take a breath. My son actually, he told me he really wanted Candyland, and I was like, I don't know, supply chain issues, right? I came home one day, he had made his own Candyland. I was like, okay, gotta play Candyland. So I played with him, and I was like, okay, maybe that'll be the end. I came home the next day, and he had, you can see here, whoops, he made the board twice as big the next day. Okay. So I just want to kind of wrap it up there. I've got a lot more clearly that I wanted to say in a little self-compassion practice, but I've run out of time. And I just want to remind us that this doesn't have to take a lot of time. We can just take a moment. I saw this meme a few years ago. It says there's this guy at the coffee shop sitting at a table, not on his phone, not on a laptop, just drinking his coffee like a psychopath, right? Just taking that time, right? Take a few sips of your coffee, put things away, you drop the kids off, you sit back down in the car, right? Just enjoy, feel the coffee, taste it, right? Move on with your day. It will be different. The way you show up will be different for yourself, for the kids, for everybody. So I guess I will close there. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time. Please feel free to stay in touch if you want the slides. Just let me know or scan the QR. Sorry, I went over.
No. Well, we're not done with Chris. Let's give him a hand. So we're going to move into our panel now. So I'm going to invite our panelists to come up, Shar and Peyton and Joanna, and realize, and Chris too.
Yep.
I'm realizing we should have tested the microphones.
They're in the store here.
Test. Should we get audio sources? Wireless mics? Which one? What number is that?
What word that's in one?
2? It's 2. Test. All right. Okay.
Hello.
All right.
All right.
We're good.
You can share these.
Okay. Good too. All right. Okay, so hi, we have the honor of having a short panel discussion, and then we'll have some Q&A with Chris as well. So I'm going to ask a few questions from the panelists. I'm going to start with Peyton. Peyton is our very special youth guest, and we've known Peyton for a while. So Peyton, if you could introduce yourself to the audience, just something about you, like what do you like to do? How do you enjoy the time that you have together? So maybe just a little bit about yourself first.
Hi, my name is Peyton. As mentioned, I'm here to bring a little bit of the teenage perspective. Fortunately, I haven't sprained my eyeballs rolling them yet, but there's still time. Don't worry. I'm 16, and part of my background here at this hospital is I struggle with chronic pain and endometriosis, as well as anxiety, OCD, and depression. And a little bit just about my life beyond my pain and anxiety is I'm a huge reader and writer, and I listen to a lot of Shawn Mendes music.
Awesome. Thank you, Peyton. So I'm wondering if you would like to share anything about how mindfulness has showed up in your life and how does it help you with some of the challenges that you just mentioned?
So I'm currently 16, which means I am in the middle of high school. High school is very stressful. Being a teenager is very hard sometimes and can definitely be a struggle. I have found that mindfulness can really help me regulate my emotions and can really help me be attentive and aware of how I'm feeling. So some things I like to do is journaling, mindful walking, things I can easily fit into my routine in small increments because, as was mentioned before, a lot of us are very busy and there's a lot being asked of us. So I try and fit in that when I can. And I try and bring it into my life with my family members and kind of check in. We update each other on our mindful goals as a way to communicate and stay on the same page. Mindfulness has really helped me, whether it was in the ER on a stressful day or whether it was just in the high school hallway listening to music.
Thank you, Peyton. So I'm going to move on. My next question are for Shar. Shar, first of all, I wonder if you want to maybe just introduce yourself and also maybe introduce the Kelty Mental Health Resource Center, which is our partner in presenting tonight.
It's a tall order, Zoom. So just so everyone knows, this event tonight is a collaboration between the Beast Children's Center Hospital Center for Mindfulness, as well as the Kelty Mental Health Resource Center. And the Kelty Center is physically located over there on campus at the Healthy Minds building. And there's some wonderful parent peer support workers that provide system navigation as well as help with resources and information. There's a wonderful new Healthy Mental Health website as well, and there's webinars, so definitely check them out. And in regards to myself, my name's Shar. I have dual roles. So I'm the program manager for the Center for Mindfulness, but I'm also a mother of 2 kids. One of them's over here quiet, surprisingly. Usually when Chris was doing the mindfulness practice, I could hear something like in this area. And I was like, that's totally Jet, like 100%. So that's me.
Thanks. And Shar, could you tell us a little bit about how mindfulness might show up in your own life as a parent or in your family?
So I was really introduced to mindfulness as an adult. And I just kind of heard about it for a lot of people, just heard about it in like pop culture. Like I heard that sports teams were starting to use it for like performance, etc. And then I really learned more about it through my work with the Center for Mindfulness. And I use it every day, all day, because there's a lot of things that happen in the time period between when your child wakes up and to get them out the door. There's like I don't know what it is. There's like 100 things to get done, and you have like 5 minutes to do it. So I'm basically like running back and forth, like get your shoes on, get your sunscreen on. Did you brush your teeth? Do you have your lunch? So I'm just like, those are the times that I find it like most so like very, very helpful, because I have to check myself sometimes. I'm like, does it matter if he has 1 shoe or 2? Like in the end, like, does it really matter? Or if you missed a part of his face, like maybe he'll get a little bit of a burn, like for sunscreen. So I just think it's been really helpful. And I've done kind of like, I've stopped myself and tried to think like, I can just take a couple breaths here and everything's going to be fine. He's going to make it to school. Everything's fine. It's not the end of the world. Like we don't need to be yelling in the hallways. Like, so I just find it really helpful because I think as parents, I find it hard because I think I have a harder time to self-regulate when I'm dealing with children, like versus just myself. So I find it so helpful to be like, yes, I can do this. And I get Jet to do it too sometimes, right? Thumbs up is the best. Yeah. Maybe you want to do a video testimonial about that. So I just think it surprises me how much I do. It comes back into my life throughout the day and for very stressful parts of my life.
Yeah, lots of different ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Shar. Okay. I'm going to go to Joanna next. So my question for Joanna is the microphone working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And apologies to the audience for the camera, but I think everyone can see our panelists now, I hope. The Zoom audience, that is. So Joanna, if you could just share, introduce yourself, and also for those who maybe don't know anything about the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, if you could just say a word about what that center is.
Absolutely. So I'm Joanna McDermott. And I am a child psychiatrist here at the hospital. And this is a wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you so much, Chris and everybody for being here tonight. And I'm also the Associate Director for the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, which is a wonderful initiative that is a collaboration of many, many individuals to make it come to be. And through generous donation from our foundation, we were able to create this wonderful center. And the mission and vision of the center is to create a more mindful hospital culture environment where compassion, love, understanding just flows. And we have programs for children and youth, and also for our parents and caregivers, as well as for our staff, trainees, and students, so that we understand that everything is interconnected. And we rest on the strength of relationships and support each other in times of vulnerability, but also building on our strengths together. So yeah, I think that would be what I would share about that. And we also have our QR code if you want to look at our website. It's been updated recently, and so you can read or understand a little bit more about what we offer online, or you can talk to us after at the end. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, and I will put up that slide in a minute. Wondering if you could tell us, Joanna, how does mindfulness affect your life as a healthcare professional when you're caring for young people and families in distress?
Yeah, well, I really liked what Chris said tonight about the panicky or the calm pilot. I think that says a lot and says a lot of it. I'll just share, it's very interesting. At one point, just a personal anecdote, I was in New York and I was at a musical concert in the audience, and not to be triggering for anyone, but we thought there was some sort of terrible event that was happening. And so we were herded into an area and we didn't know what was going to happen. And so I was quite scared. And we were just in this, and I was thinking, okay, what are my escape routes here? How am I going to get out of this? And there was this wonderful man. I presume he might have been a grandfather with his grandchild. And I could hear his voice, and he said, it's going to be okay, son. We're going to get out of here quickly, and then we're going to go have a cup of hot chocolate. And I was like, oh. And then right after that, there was somebody said, I'm getting out of here, and elbowed their way through. And I was like, oh, that made me feel uncomfortable. So, when I was listening to your story about, and plus I've been in turbulent flights and everything like that, but just thinking like that grandfather, I was like, oh, he made me feel so safe. And so I think, as I've gone through my training, it's a great privilege to be a physician, service with others, but to learn from wonderful colleagues and to actually help people if we can. We absolutely need to be able to help ourselves. So for me, mindfulness is a framework to cope, to help me with stress. Very useful when we're stressed, to be able to step back also and then reconnect with my values. Why am I doing this, right? How can I connect in a meaningful way? So I practice mindfulness for myself so I can be of service to others. And then it also helps me to step back from the stream of distress, those critical or judgmental thoughts that can get in my way and rob me of my ability to be fully present, but also that cause me suffering. So that's the other part that I love about mindfulness, is that it allows me to tap into my deep network of compassion, which is limitless. So we talk a lot about depletion and burnout and exhaustion and things like that. With mindfulness, I feel fresh. And then when I step back, all of a sudden there's a seed of joy. So I think that is a beautiful thing as well. That's a gift that you actually get to remember, that there are those seeds that are there and that they can grow. And then we can share that with others. So I think it helps for a meaningful life.
Thank you so much, Joanna. So I have one more question for Peyton, and then we'll go to audience questions. Peyton, as a teenager.
As a teenager, yes.
As a teenager, what do you want parents to know about how you would want them to really be present for you? Because Chris and Joanna and Shar have talked a lot about being present for their families. What would you want parents of teenagers to know about how to be present for teenagers?
I think a really good thing for parents to do, again, I've never been a parent, so this is just a teenager perspective.
Exactly.
But a really good thing that I think is really good to consider is that teenagehood is very different than teenagehood would have been 15, 40, however many years ago. And I think things are forever changing, and no two experiences are exactly the same, especially if your child is dealing with some form of severe anxiety or some form of severe pain. I also really agreed with what was said today about a calm parent means a calm child. And I also think that's a very good point for physicians and doctors and nurses and all that sort of thing, because someone who is calm and someone who has a reassuring attitude can really affect a person and really ground a person. So a lot of the time I will come home very stressed from school as a very academically achieving student. I will come home in a panic. I will need a second to regulate myself. And a lot of the time, my parents are there to remind me to regulate myself. And this sounds so simple. And a lot of the time in the moment, I snap at them and I'm like, I don't need to regulate myself. No, who would even think of that? And I think just that reminder oftentimes is very important to me, and I'm very grateful to get it. And even though as teenagers might not always react in the most kind way, those reminders are a key part to me feeling better.
Thanks. So parents are important in helping young people ground by grounding themselves first. Okay, so those are words of wisdom from our youth perspective. I'm going to open it up now to audience questions. We'll start with audience in the room. You'll see these little buttons in front of you. So if you want to maybe push the button, a little red light will turn on and your microphone will be on. And we'd love to hear a few questions from inside the audience or comments. Okay, yes. Okay. You see the red light? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Mirala. I'm one of the peer support workers family peer support workers at Kelty, but also mostly I'm coming here as a parent of 2 teenagers. What I loved hearing is that mindfulness is more about unlearning than learning. And as I was reflecting, hearing this talk was about how much my teenagers already incorporate mindfulness into their day-to-day routines. One of my teens folds origami, and I spent a lot of time doing it. And I came prepared to teach him new mindfulness skills when I get home, now realizing that I probably do not need to do that. But a question that I have is, you mentioned vagus nerve. What are the best ways to activate the vagus nerves? What are the best practices to activate that?
I haven't actually studied that much of Stephen Porges and Deb Dana and their polyvagal stuff, but I do know it's a lot of sort of the standard, other self-soothing practices, breathing, getting in touch with our senses, creating environmental cues of safety and reminders of safety. In the afternoon talk, I was mentioning Deb Dana, and she talks about, well, a lot of people hear about triggers, right? Deb also talks about glimmers being the opposite of triggers, right? Glimmers are, oh, this thing is triggering me, but oh, I'm safe, right? I'm away from home, but, I've got my stuffed animals. I'm in this other environment, but I've got this person with me, or this, I've got my favorite song with me, or I've got something else to remind me of safety, to remind me of an attachment figure, to remind me of my own strength in some way, that can help with that self-regulation piece oftentimes, as well as mindfulness, breathing, movement, other kinds of practices as well, stretching, those kinds of things. And someone else might be more qualified for that answer as well. I don't know.
Joanna, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm not sure I'm qualified, but I'll suggest some things too. But I love the idea of working with our nervous system. So I really appreciate those in your talk this afternoon and now, and also your question, Mireya. Some of the therapies like DBT, for example, have incorporated things like a half smile. Mm-hmm. Right. And sometimes just above the lip here, just to like touching. I think I've understood that perhaps can also be somewhat calming. Hand on heart is a really beautiful one. Actually, the practice you guided us through the other day too is sort of visualizing, heart with like sun and warmth coming out of that. That's a beautiful image. I think that working with that sort of idea of comfort and safety could be individualized. Right? From Thich Nhat Hanh's beautiful breathing in deeply, breathing out slowly. Like I practice that a lot, actually. I created a peace practice where peace stands for pause, because we give ourselves the gift of a pause. Exhale. So not just like, but actually breathing in and focusing on that exhale and just, allow, care, expand. It's actually on the Breather app, so you can look into that. But that was what I wanted to tap into there for that practice when we might be distressed. From a trauma-informed mindfulness lens, there are the things that we can do. For example, excuse me, paying attention to the inner experience. And I think you tapped into this when you talked about movement and sound. Sometimes when I'm guiding people in practices, I think that paying attention to things outside of our inner sort of proprioception, interoception experience is more helpful, like sounds. So grounding with sounds, having sort of like a little object. Sometimes I have a stone. I lend stones to my patients, and they sometimes come back and sometimes they go off and on their own. Precious little stones, and you can rub them and just sort of feel this tangible piece. And the last one is some feeling our feet. And you talked about that when you were mentioning walking and walking quietly. But and that's one that actually Dr. Ron Epstein talks about a lot too, like, where are my feet? And sometimes I think about that in my day. Where are my feet? Oh, there they are. But I was actually in my head. So when I can feel my feet, it's usually also not necessarily a traumatic kind of potentially triggering part of our body. So we have to be careful too about what parts of our body we pay attention to when we're mindful, because those could also be potentially triggering. But our feet are usually pretty neutral parts of our body. Although if you have pain, then maybe not, right? Or maybe you're missing one of your feet too. So again, I just want to be very sensitive to everyone's experience, but those would just be a few. Very good question. Yeah.
I think that trauma sensitivity piece is really important. I do think that sort of like edges of the body, external anchors, rather than like close your eyes, go deeply, which can be overwhelming or create, or sort of encourage dissociation in some ways without meaning to. But I love the feel your feet. I have a friend that says, if worry's up in your head, your feet are the farthest place, right? Press them into the ground. Is it warm or cool, or your feet, dry or damp? That kind of thing can be really grounding. So
yeah, sometimes we say like noticing those distal parts of our body, right? Like our hands or our fingers. Actually, mindfulness with our hand, that's a really lovely practice. Yeah, right? Yeah, you can rub them together and hear how that sounds, the warmth that comes, right? Or hand on heart, those sorts of things. But getting out distally, feet, toes, fingers, right? Very useful to get further away from here and outside of ourselves. Yeah.
I think it's time to do the wrap.
You're welcome.